One day you'll realize that the thing exhausting you isn't the work itself. It's the feeling of constantly fixing things you never broke in the first place. You correct your coworkers' mistakes. You deal with the consequences of bad decisions. You stay late to save projects that should never have reached that point. You keep trying to hold everything together. Because if you don't, nobody else will. But then something strange starts to happen. The people creating the problems keep doing exactly what they've always done. The people making poor decisions keep doing exactly what they've always done. The system keeps operating exactly the same way. The only thing that changes is you. You become more exhausted, more doubtful of yourself, and more convinced that something is slowly being drained out of your life. It took Melissa years to understand this. She wasn't being destroyed by the workload. She was being destroyed by trying to survive in a system that constantly took more than it gave back. And that's where most people misunderstand what's happening. They see an employee losing motivation, someone becoming more distant from their work, less enthusiastic, less engaged, and they assume that person has changed. But the truth is often the exact opposite. It's not laziness, it's not weakness, and it's not failure. It's a person who has been trying for too long in an environment that keeps taking their energy. Melissa used to think she simply needed to try harder, be more patient, be more positive. But the harder she tried, the deeper she felt herself sinking, until she finally realized something she wished someone had told her years earlier. Not every problem at work is your responsibility. Not every failure around you reflects your abilities. And not every workplace deserves your sacrifice. Once Melissa understood that, she started seeing work in a completely different way. Not with bitterness, but with clarity. And that was when she began learning the rules that helped her protect her peace in a place that was never truly peaceful. Number 1, it's not your fault. The first rule sounds simple, but it took Melissa years to truly believe it. Not everything happening around you is your fault. For a long time, whenever something went wrong, her first reaction was always the same. Look inward. Figure out what she had done wrong. A project falls behind. Maybe I didn't do enough. A client is unhappy. Maybe I missed something. The team is overwhelmed. Maybe I need to work harder. It sounds responsible, but over time, that mindset became a trap. Because some problems never started with you. A weak manager, a chaotic process, a department that's been understaffed for years, or goals that were unrealistic from the very beginning. Those aren't tests of your competence. They're cracks in an unhealthy system. And unhealthy systems always seem to find someone willing to absorb the impact. Melissa did that for far too long. Whenever things were about to fall apart, she rushed in to save them. Whenever someone dropped the ball, she quietly picked it up. Whenever the organization failed to prepare, she used her own time and energy to fill the gap. At first, she thought that was responsibility. Later, she realized she had become a shock absorber for problems that should have been solved by someone else. Then, one day, a question appeared in her mind. Why am I paying the price for decisions I didn't make? From that day forward, she started drawing a clearer line between her responsibilities and the organization's responsibilities. And that small shift led her to an even harder truth to accept. Number 2, workplace fairness is a myth. For years, Melissa believed that hard work would eventually be noticed, that good employees would be recognized, that people who created value would be rewarded with opportunities. It sounds reasonable. It's also what most of us want to believe. That if we do everything right, the results will eventually reflect our efforts. But reality doesn't always work that way. Some people are constantly praised in meetings despite contributing very little. Some create problems and rarely face any consequences. And others quietly carry the workload of an entire team while remaining almost invisible. At first, this frustrated Melissa. Then it disappointed her. Eventually, it exhausted her. Because she spent far too much energy expecting a system to behave in a way it was never designed to operate. What drives many workplaces isn't always competence. It's influence, visibility, relationships, convenience. And sometimes it's simply about who happens to be sitting in the room where decisions are made. That's not an easy truth to accept. especially for people who deeply want things to be fair. Melissa was one of those people. She believed that if she stayed patient, worked hard enough, and performed well enough, the system would eventually correct itself. But the system never changed. What changed was the way she saw it. She stopped waiting for fairness, stopped hoping that one day everyone would naturally notice all of her effort, and started focusing on the only thing she could truly control: herself. It may sound cold, but it was actually freeing. Because once she stopped trying to change things beyond her reach, she finally got some of her energy back. Yet there was still another trap that kept her stuck longer than anything else. A trap that many talented and dedicated people eventually fall into. The moment when work stops being something you do and starts becoming who you are. Number 3, don't sell your soul to the company. There's a trap that catches a lot of hardworking people. They don't just do their jobs. They start living inside them. Melissa did the same thing. Little by little, work stopped being a place she went to earn a living. It became the place that determined how she felt about herself. A compliment could make her happy all day. A criticism could keep her awake all night. A successful meeting made her feel valuable. A small setback made her start questioning herself. At the time, she thought she was simply dedicated, but dedication and dependence are not the same thing. Because when you allow work to become the only source of your self-worth, you also give it the power to take that self-worth away at any moment. That's when Melissa began rebuilding a life outside the office. Friends who had nothing to do with work, hobbies that had nothing to do with KPIs, moments of happiness that had nothing to do with performance reviews. And the more she invested in those parts of her life, the more she realized something important. You do your job, but your job is not you. Maybe the hardest lesson in corporate life isn't learning how to work. It's learning how not to let work determine your value as a person. If you've ever felt like work is taking up too much space in your life, comment the word peace, just one word, so other people know they're not the only ones who feel that way. And once Melissa stopped tying her entire sense of worth to her career, she became less afraid, because not everything that happened at the office felt like a matter of survival anymore. And that's when she learned another skill that helped her survive. Number 4, quit the job in your head. It sounds negative, but for Melissa, it was one of the healthiest decisions she ever made. Not quitting her job, quitting it in her mind. For years, work followed her home. One frustrating email could ruin her entire evening. One stressful meeting could stay with her all weekend. One unfair comment could replay in her head for hours. Then she realized something. Many of the things exhausting her weren't happening at the office. They were happening long after she had already left. That's when Melissa changed. She still worked hard. She still fulfilled her responsibilities. She was still as professional as ever, but she stopped taking the company home with her. She stopped analyzing every conversation, stopped trying to solve things beyond her control, stopped spending energy on battles she could never win. At first, she felt guilty, like she cared less than she used to. But that wasn't true. She wasn't working less. She was simply no longer sacrificing her mental health for things that produced no meaningful result. And the more distance she created from the chaos around her, the more clearly she could see, including a truth she had never fully noticed before. Many things that are labeled urgent aren't actually that urgent. Number 5, it's not an emergency. There was a period in Melissa's life when she treated everything like it was on fire. Every email needed an immediate response. Every message required immediate attention. Every request felt like it had to be handled right away. Everything carried the feeling that if she didn't act immediately, something terrible would happen. So she reacted instinctively. When other people were stressed, she became stressed. When other people panicked, she rushed in to fix things. After years of living this way, she began noticing something. The issues that once seemed critically urgent often disappeared surprisingly fast. Some problems kept the entire team awake for a week. A month later, nobody even remembered them. Some emails were marked urgent. A few days later, even the sender had forgotten about them. After watching this pattern long enough, Melissa realized that pressure and importance are not the same thing. Many emergencies are simply the result of someone preparing too late. Or worse, panic being passed from one person to another. So she developed a small habit. Before reacting, she asked herself, is this truly important? Or does it just feel important? That simple question gave her back a surprising amount of time, energy, and peace of mind. And once she stopped chasing every alarm that appeared throughout the day, she started seeing something else more clearly. The people who were creating those alarms in the first place. Number 6, don't react. For years, Melissa believed that the best way to protect herself was to explain. If she was misunderstood, she explained. If she was criticized, she explained. If she was treated unfairly, she kept explaining. It sounded reasonable. But in reality, it left her more exhausted with every passing year. Because not everyone is looking for the truth. Some people are looking for a reaction. They want to see you angry. They want to see you lose your composure. They want to see you start doubting yourself. The moment that happens, they've already gotten what they wanted. After falling into the same cycle over and over again, Melissa changed her approach. Less arguing, less defending herself, less obsession with proving she was right. Not because she was weak, but because she realized her energy was worth more than pointless battles. What surprised her was that the calmer she became, the harder she was to manipulate. Because people can only push the buttons you allow them to see. But emotional control alone wasn't enough to protect a career. Melissa needed another layer of protection, something more reliable than human memory. Number 7, write everything down. There was a time when Melissa believed that results would speak for themselves. If she did good work, people would remember. If she contributed enough, people would recognize it. But reality isn't that simple. A meeting ends. Everyone walks away with a different version of what happened. A promise is made. A few months later, nobody remembers exactly what was promised. A project succeeds. And over time, the credit gets diluted among a long list of names. Those experiences led Melissa to adopt a small habit. She started documenting the important things. A follow-up email after a meeting. A written summary after decisions were made. A record of the results she had delivered. At first glance, it didn't seem like a big deal, but over time, it became one of the most effective forms of protection she ever had. Because memories change, emotions change, stories get retold in different ways, but documented facts remain. And the more she practiced this habit, the more she understood something important. Peace at work doesn't come from everyone treating you fairly. It comes from no longer relying entirely on other people to protect your future. Some people spend their entire careers trying to become irreplaceable. Melissa used to think that was the goal, until she realized there was a more important question. If a company could replace you within a few weeks, why would you give it all of your peace of mind? Work matters, but it is not your entire life. It is part of your life, not the owner of it. And perhaps that's what toxic workplaces make us forget. That before you were an employee, before you were a manager, before you were a job title, you were a human being, a person with relationships worth protecting, a person with health worth preserving, a person with dreams that exist beyond the walls of an office. Work will always take as much as it can. That's simply its nature. The only real question is, what are you going to keep for yourself? If today's video made you think, share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you'd like to continue having conversations like this, we'd love to have you here at You and Me at Work. We're building a community for people trying to survive corporate life without losing themselves in the process. Thank you for spending part of your day with us. I hope you're able to protect your peace no matter what workplace you walk into tomorrow. And I'll see you in the next video.